Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Our lifestyle is Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Every day we are tuned into Srimad Bhagavatam, not Bhagavat Saptaha, as some of you know, 7-day focus, but eternally. Today we want to talk about Srimad Bhagavatam as our personal shelter, our individual personal shelter, as well as the panacea, the cure for the whole world's problems. So we will try to address these two aspects. I'd like you to consider yourself to be submerged in darkness. To help us do that and see the unique light that Srimad Bhagavatam offers, we'll turn to the 11th canto. The scene in which Krishna is leaving his manifest pastimes, leaving his manifest presence, and his chariot driver, the Dwarkavasi, known as Daruka, realizes what's happening. Those of you who have read Nectar Devotion know that Daruka is famous for his selfless devotional service, his pure devotional service, in which he's feeling ecstasy while fanning Krishna, and then he condemns his ecstasy because it's getting in the way of his service. He's an eternally liberated soul, part of Krishna's entourage. And the reality has just hit him. Krishna is departing the ordinary vision of this world. What does Daruka say? Apashyatas touch charanam bhujam pabo dristi panasta tamasi pravishta disho najane nalabe chashantim yata nishayam udupe panashte. Very poetic. Just as on a moonless night, people are merged into darkness and cannot find their way. Now that I've lost sight of your lotus feet, my Lord, I have lost my vision and am wandering blindly in darkness. I cannot tell my direction, nor can I find any peace. Submerged in the darkness of Kali Yuga, a situation in which human beings today think they have the answers, think they know what is progress, think they know what is happiness. We may wonder, what is the solution to cut through our complacency, our lethargy, our ignorance, our stubbornness, our lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, and illusion? It seems indeed like everything is going against us in terms of living an auspicious life, moving forward with our spiritual development. And you're correct to think that way, except for the reality that Srimad Bhagavatam is present. A moonless night, you can't find your way. And as Daruka says, I've lost sight, my Lord, of your lotus feet. I've lost my vision. I'm wandering blindly in darkness. I can't tell my direction, and I can't find any peace. What can Srimad Bhagavatam do for us as individuals? Can it be that just by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam with concentrated attention, hearing, reading, saying, can it be that all the troublesome things in my heart will be resolved? Every devotee needs to have this experience of being rescued from dense darkness simply by the light of Srimad Bhagavatam. For such a moving expression of personal indebtedness to Srimad Bhagavatam, let's hear from Sanatana Goswami in his text, Krishna Leela Stava, a section of that work called Srimad Bhagavata Mahima Stotram. 5 verses or so, which so powerfully describe the dependency of the bhakta on Srimad Bhagavatam in a most personal relationship. We're not dealing with some metaphysical text. We're not dealing with some compendium of religious doctrine. We are dealing with the Supreme Personality of Godhead present in his literary form. And that's something that every devotee has to realize for himself, for herself. Otherwise, you can mouth the words and you'll benefit, certainly. Yes, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhadra Purnima. Yes, yes. The literary incarnation of Godhead. Yes, yes. But we all need the experience. We want to move in the direction that Sanatana Goswami presents. Because bhakti is all about relationships. Relationships with the Shastra, relationships with the Mahamantra, relationships with the spiritual master, relationships with the deity, relationships with the association of devotees, and also relationships with those abhaktas, those who are non-devotees. Our relationships with them are always geared toward how to engage them in devotional service. If not today, then tomorrow. So please listen as Sanatana Goswami praises the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadhya, Sarva Lokaika Drikpada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Is that an exaggeration or just some kind of enthusiastic talk? You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. This is something we want to strive to realize as we make advancement by serving the book Bhagavata and the person Bhagavata. We are able to see past religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and even past liberation from material existence. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu, Kali Dvanto Dita Ditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life heir of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Our aim in life is to experience, to realize that Srimad Bhagavatam is the exact image of Sri Krishna. It's not just a religious book. It's the presence of Krishna, just as the Maha Mantra is. When we gain experience of these transcendental realities, then we can effectively reach out to others. Sanatana Goswami goes on in such a personal way. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varsyat Sharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. So personal. Such a prayer of dependency on Srimad Bhagavatam. Mareka Bando Mat Sangin, Mad Guru Man Mahadana, Man Nista Rakamad Bhagya, Marananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy. I bow down to you. A sadhu, sadhuta dayan ti nichoch chata kara. Ana muncha karachin mam premna hrit hantayo spura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. So deeply, intensely personal is this glorification by Sanatana Goswami for Srimad Bhagavatam. No trace of being theoretical, no trace of just expounding religious doctrine. He's showing you what real life is all about. Please never leave me. You would think that he's speaking to a dearmost companion, and he is, but you would think, well, he must be talking about another human being. No, he's talking about his dearmost companion, Krishna, in his direct form as Srimad Bhagavatam. So please let his words sink into your consciousness. We want to revisit, because I know so many of you have read it. We'll revisit the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The question is, what's happening now that Krishna is no longer manifest to the ordinary vision of the world? These sages at Naimisaranya have asked Sutta Goswami 6 questions in chapter 1. By studying these 6 questions, you see the whole Bhagavatam starting to assemble and move forward. And these 6 questions are so essential for any truly progressive human being. So, what were those 6 questions? Some of them you may not easily detect. I think those of you who have studied Bhakti Shastri have learned to pick them out. They are there. First of all, they ask, what is most beneficial for humanity? What ordinary person today knows the answer to that question? What is most beneficial for all humanity? Well, money, satisfaction of my senses, social respectability, prestige. That's as far as it gets for most people. Do good for others, whatever that is. Do good. Amidst such shallow thinking or lack of thinking, you have the light of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's dealing with the issue, yenatma supersediti. How can the self actually be satisfied? We were explaining on Sunday, based on the teachings of Lord Vamanadev in his dialogue with Bali Maharaj. Lord Vamanadev points out that yes, you can have your ambitions for material development. And you may even attain what you're after, what you're going after. But that doesn't mean you'll be content and satisfied. So this is the materialistic game. You're free to have delusions. You're free to try to fulfill your material ambitions. Let me attain this. Let me get that. Let me acquire this. You may actually get those things, whatever you want. But satisfaction and contentment is something else. So I spoke briefly on Sunday for those who weren't there. About the example of birds on a tree. The Upanishadic example is very famous. It's quoted in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Dwa superna sakaya. Dwa superna sayuja sakaya. There are two birds on the tree of the body. One is the eating bird, the other is the witnessing bird. In other words, one is the jivatma, living entity, trying to enjoy the fruits on the tree. And the other bird is the paramatma, the super soul, observing and watching. That's the Vedic version of the example of two birds on the tree. But those of you who are listening on Sunday may remember the Kali Yuga equivalent of the example. Two birds on the tree. One bird is named more, and the other bird's named better. And those birds are always together. If you've got more, you've got better. I was recalling hearing His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj relay in his class last week about someone who was at his time the richest person in the world, multi-billionaire. And so he was asked, can you explain your vision of life? Can you explain your philosophy of living? And he said, sure. It all boils down to one word: more. Why? Because more means better. Those two birds are always together. But we explained on Sunday that many contemporary social thinkers are having doubts, severe doubts, so much so that they say, okay, about those two birds on the tree, more and better, it seems the bird known as better has flown off. You may have more, but that doesn't mean you have better. So it's very important what the sages at Naimishranya are asking Sutta Goswami. What is most beneficial for the self? And then you have to know, what is that real self? In the chapter about Lord Vamanadev, dialoguing with Bali Maharaj before Vamanadev takes his steps, Prabhupada gives a very astounding purport about senses and super senses. We'll never attain satisfaction by just gratifying the senses. We need to consider the super senses. The soul has senses, and bhakti is meant for those spiritual senses, super senses. So Srila Prabhupada brilliantly made this distinction. Senses, you're struggling with your senses for satisfaction, but they're external. And then super senses, the senses of your real self. You can only be satisfied in that way, by doing what satisfies the super senses. So this is a very appropriate tool, this example, for freeing yourself from unnecessary material endeavors. What about my super senses? So the sages at Naimishranya are concerned. Please, they say to Sutta Goswami, explain what is most beneficial for satisfying humanity as an individual and as a collective species. And then they point out there are so many shastras, so many scriptures in the Vedic tent. Can you please select the essence? Otherwise, this Shastra says this, the other Shastra says that. Can you select what is actually the key for satisfying the self? Select amongst all the recommendations in the Shastras. The third question, we'd like to know the purpose of Krishna's appearing from Devaki in Mathura. We'd like to know why. Furthermore, can you describe the pastimes of Krishna? Krishna has all the avatars within him. Can you talk about him? And number 5, let's hear about the Leela avatars, the pastime incarnations of Godhead. And then we get to number 6. Krishna has departed. Where is the shelter of Dharma now? This is, you might say, the most dramatic question. The Krishna sun has set, apparently. It's a verse in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam. Krishna Jumani Nimloche. Krishna's sun has set, and the world's plunged into darkness. So you really feel that situation as you read Bhagavatam. And naturally, your heart is longing for a solution. The famous query, Bruhi Yogeshvare Krishna Brahmanye Dharma Varmani Swam Kashtam Adunopete Dharma Kam Sharanam Gata. Since Sri Krishna, the absolute truth, the master of all mystic powers, has departed for his own abode, please tell us to whom the religious principles have now gone for shelter. These sages understand that without real Dharma, there's no hope for humanity. What will take the place of Krishna's presence? It seems that one sun, S-U-N, has gone. What is the sun that will light the sky in replacement? So in this way, we should consider or reconsider our relationship to Srimad Bhagavatam, because we want concentrated reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. The deeper our service attitude is, the more we'll be able to penetrate into Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to stimulate our attraction for Krishna and eventually revive our dormant love for Krishna. So we have to give it a chance to, shall we say, work its show, to do its thing. We've got to allow Bhagavatam to enter the core of our heart and work its miracle. One thing we want to guard against is the concoction, the mental concoction that I've read all this before, especially first Cano. I know first Cano. Yeah, 5 years ago I studied Bhakti Shastri. We want to guard against that attitude because, as Sanatan Goswami points out in his prayers, his glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam, every syllable of Srimad Bhagavatam is saturated with Krishna prema. We aspire to see that in every syllable. Every syllable is ever fresh. It's very important that we approach Srimad Bhagavatam with the right attitude, just as it's important how we approach the holy name, how we